Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now I'm always on the lookout for rare or interesting items, and usually if a seller uses one of those words or perhaps a combination of them in the title or description, well, I'm very likely to buy it. However, I came across a listing recently that seemed a little fishy to me, but nonetheless, of course, I purchased it. Now, the item in question was described as a rare 6-core Intel ultra-fast gaming CPU, and at £60, well, I just had to buy it. The first line of the description was also as follows. This fast Intel KB Lake based processor combines 2 physical core with 4 hyper-threaded cores for a quality gaming experience. So yeah, as you could pretty much tell by that, this isn't a 6-core chip at all. This was a 2-core, 4-threaded CPU, and at this point there was no mention of the exact item specifics in the description, so I went ahead and purchased it anyway, and not too long ago it turned up and I stuck it in the system, and well, to be honest, I was quite surprised by the results. Now, what I will say about the seller is that I don't know if they were being purposefully deceptive or whether or not they were just inexperienced. What I do know though is that after I had purchased the item, the seller profile disappeared, which is always a bad sign, giving me no real chance at returning this thing. So I guess we'll just have to make do with it. Before revealing the specifics of this item, let me just throw up a few gameplay clips because, to be honest, despite this not exactly being a 6-core ultra-fast CPU, well, in 2020 it still holds up quite well, and that's going to be the main topic of this video. So, what is this mystery CPU? Well, before revealing its true identity, I thought I'd throw up a few gameplay benchmarks first. What I will say though, is that this is not a 6-core chip. I don't think any of Intel's Coffee Lake CPUs had 6 cores. As I mentioned before, what had happened here was that the seller had added the physical core count to the thread count and made 6. This is actually a 2-core chip with 4 threads. Using the word rare in the listing title was actually understandable to some degree because these CPUs are quite hard to find, and for £60 it seems I got a good price when you compare that to the other listings for these. Usually they are impossible to find, and when you can find one, well, they're priced higher than say an i3-9100F or Ryzen 3 3100. Both of which would make better purchases. So enough teasing, what is this mystery chip? Well, it's a Pentium from 2018, a G5500 to be precise. Although Pentiums of past generations made sense for anyone on a tighter budget, especially those who wanted Core i3 performance for a little less money, by the time this came out there were other better performing and closely priced options available. Back in the days of the Pentium G3258, for example, when core count wasn't as important, the Pentiums provided a great way of getting into gaming, and in some instances even offered similar performance to higher end chips. Games then started using more and more cores and more threads, and 2-core CPUs started to really struggle. Thankfully, the hyper-threading does still mean that you will see some pretty respectable averages with the G5500, but in some cases, stutter and lag is still inevitable, and you will find the CPU maxing out at 100% a lot of the time, and it will hold powerful graphics cards back in 2020. So the CPU was priced okay in comparison to a few other, albeit infrequent listings, so it wasn't necessarily a rip-off, it was just described in the most incorrect way possible. Adding the core count to the thread count doesn't make this a 6-core chip, but I'm sure pretty much all of you know that. Maybe the seller thought it wasn't going to sell if they didn't stretch the truth. Because, let's face it, these aren't exactly flying off of the used market shelves these days. Not cool. As I said before, it isn't a bad chip, it's just too sparsely available to really think about too much. Though I did want to move on and take this video in another direction. This whole scenario just got me thinking about Pentium CPUs again. So let's say money is tight and you want a Pentium based PC build. How would a budget combination perform? Well, I've recently seen a few Pentium G4560 CPUs going for a good price. A couple of CEX stores here have them for sale at £30. It's a year older than the G5500 and requires a motherboard that supports Kaby Lake, but it still has 2 cores and 4 threads, and pairing it with a 1650 Super seems like a more logical choice than with, say, a 1080 Ti. The 1650 Super or 5500 XT for that matter would make a good pairing, and you probably wouldn't want to go much higher than this as far as a graphics card is concerned. Both are decent gaming cards for the money. I've got a few G4560 and 1650 Super results here now, just to give you a brief overview of performance with 16 gigs of 2400 MHz RAM. I might do a full build video with this CPU again soon, but let me know what you think. As I mentioned beforehand, thanks to hyperthreading, we are still seeing okay numbers. I had a problem with Call of Duty Warzone whereby the game wouldn't get past the loading screen, and I don't really know why, so I'll look into that and try and update you if I figure it out. I couldn't seem to get into an online or bot match. That doesn't mean it will happen for you, it might just be something wrong for me during this test. I remember a time when so many people recommended this chip, and it's no surprise why. This was great for the money and made the need for an entry-level i3 redundant, as they still only had 2 cores and 4 threads too. So many reviewers praised this thing. Without repeating the obvious, all I can say is that in 2020, 2 cores and 4 threads aren't ideal. In fact, 4 core chips without hyperthreading will still struggle in some games. I still think the G4560 makes more sense than the G5500 though, based on availability and used market price alone, but that may depend on where you live. So there we go, another dodgy listing investigated. This 6-core chip turned out to be nothing more than a 2-core, 4-threaded chip, but yeah, I think from the moment I laid eyes on it, I knew that was going to be the case, because going into it, I knew that Kaby Lake and Coffee Lake CPUs didn't have anything 6-core in the lineup. But there we have it. At least me buying this has stopped someone else falling for it, and if it's someone building their first PC who isn't too knowledgeable on the availability of certain chips, well, hopefully I've saved them getting ripped off. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like on it down below. Leave a dislike if you didn't. Let me know if you still run with one of these old school Pentiums in your build and how well it's getting on for you in terms of gaming and other CPU intensive tasks. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.